3, The Third Age, Chapter 1, The Disaster of the Gladden Fields. This is a late writing that Tolkien did well after the publication of The Lord of the Rings. We are now right at the beginning of the Third Age after the defeat of Sauron. Isildur, as Elendil's heir, is now the king of Arnor and lord of all the Dunedain in the north, Arnor, and in the south, Gondor. He spends a year in Gondor taking care of business before he decides he can return to Arnor as king. But first he wants to stop by Imladris, where his wife and youngest son, Valandil, are. So his planned path should bring him north from Osgiliath, up the vales of Anduin, and over Cirith Forn and Andrath, the high pass that leads directly to Rivendell. It's a long road that demands much endurance on the part of the men traveling it. The Numenoreans in Middle-earth don't use horses for war, keep that in mind, so Isildur's company must walk the whole way. The few horses that they do have right now are kind of small and only used as pack animals. Isildur bids farewell to his nephew Meneldil, who he has made king of Gondor. It's September of the year 2 of the Third Age when he and his company set out, and they expect to get to Rivendell by mid-October. He travels with 3 of his sons, Elendur, Aratan, and Cirion, along with his guard of 200 knights and soldiers. They go up through Dagorlad, the Brown Lands, and when they get in sight of the south of Greenwood the Great, it starts to rain, which lasts for 4 days. So the river is now quite swollen, so they stick close to the woods. So, on their 30th day of travel, in the late afternoon, they pass the northern borders of the Gladden Fields, which is a marshland. The fair day was waning. Above the distant mountains, clouds were gathering, reddened by the misty sun as it drew down towards them. The deeps of the valley were already in gray shadow. The men are singing as they go along, because their journey is already 2/3 finished. They feel like they're in the home stretch. But then, as the sun goes behind the clouds, suddenly orcs start pouring out of the forest on the slopes above, screaming their evil war cries. The men are outnumbered 10-1, so Isildur commands them to get into a shield wall formation with both ends able to taper back and form a circle if outflanked. Things are not looking good, and Isildur's oldest son, Elendur, says to him, "We are nowhere near anyone who can help us, and we bear burdens of worth beyond all reckoning." Hoo-hoo, we know what he means by that. So, as the orcs approach, Isildur hands over the Shards of Narsil to a soldier who is also his kinsman. He commands the guy to run away and keep the sword safe, so the soldier successfully escapes along with a companion. Meanwhile, the orcs shoot a bunch of arrows and charge in a wedge, hoping to break the shield wall. But the Numenoreans are way bigger than the orcs, and their armor is too thick, so the orcs break up and retreat towards the forest. The red rim of the sun gleamed out from the clouds as it went down behind the mountains. Night would soon be falling. Isildur orders the men to start marching again, this time to the lower, flatter area closer to the river, so that in case the orcs try to attack again, at least they won't be on high ground. But these aren't the only orcs around. Orcs of the Misty Mountains are watching the passes, and even though Sauron isn't around anymore, his evil ring sure is, and it calls out to them to help him. The men only make it 1 mile until the orcs come down in a giant crescent and surround them in a huge ring while remaining out of the men's bow shot. Then they start to slowly close in, and Elendur says to Isildur, "Can't you use that powerful thing you have? Hint, hint." But Isildur replies, "I don't have the strength to bend it to my will. I dread the pain of touching it. It needs to go to one of the keepers of the 3 rings." But then the orcs attack suddenly and practically fling themselves onto the men, killing Isildur's 2 younger sons. Elendur finds Isildur in the crowd and tells him he should run away to keep the rings safe. So, before leaving, Isildur asks for his son's forgiveness for failing to destroy the ring due to pride, and thus getting Elendil into this hopeless situation. He then sets it on his finger and flees towards the west, although the jewel on his crown shines bright red when he does. That's kind of interesting, it doesn't go invisible. So Elendil and all the men die, all except one young esquire. Meanwhile, Isildur is running away in great pain and anguish of heart until he slows down when he gets to the grassy flats. It's nighttime now, and he has to go carefully so he doesn't trip and fall. He finally gets to the banks of Anduin around midnight, and he's really exhausted. He gets rid of all his armor and most of his weapons, just piles them on the bank, and jumps into the river, hoping to swim across. Now, even though he's really strong, he can't go against the swift current, and it kind of pulls him south, back towards the Gladden fields. He soon finds himself amidst a bunch of rushes and reeds, and struggles to get free from them. There suddenly he knew that the ring had gone. By chance, or chance well used, it had left his hand, and gone where he could never hope to find it again. So then the pain suddenly leaves him, and he feels like a great burden has been lifted. He swims to the western shore, heaves himself up through the reeds, and even though he's so tired and weak, there are some orcs nearby. They see him, and they think he's some sort of monstrous shadow of fear with this shining red eye, so they shoot him and run away scared. So he's shot through the heart and the throat, and falls back into the river, never to be seen again. So what are the sources of the legend of Isildur's death? Like, how do we come by this tale? Well, the young esquire who survives the attack manages to hear Isildur and Elendil talk right near the end, and also that soldier who Isildur sends away with the Shards of Narsil escapes with a companion, so they at least witness the attack itself. But what about Isildur's actual moment of death? How do we know about that? Well, it's mostly guessed at, with bits of evidence pieced together. So, for the longest time, it's been known that Isildur had the ring, ran towards the river, left his armor on the east bank, was shot by orcs on the west bank because their camps were found there later on, and was lost in the river with the ring because neither he nor it were found anywhere nearby. Now, all of this had to have happened because Isildur, when still alive, is very strong and hearty, and to add to that, every Numenorean carries with him a small vial of a special drink and a wallet of special whey bread that can give strength for many days. No, these are not the elven lembas or miruvor, but they're very similar. So these items would have sustained him and allowed him to escape to Lorien or Moria, but since he doesn't make it to either one of those places, and since the wallet is nowhere to be found near his armor, then based on all the evidence at hand, the logical conclusion is that he is killed and lost. So then we get closer and closer in time to the War of the Ring, and at the Council of Elrond, it's revealed to everyone that the One Ring was found in the river near the west bank at the edge of the Gladden fields. And then after the War of the Ring, King Elessar starts work at reordering his realm. So, first, he goes to restore Orthanc. And we all know Saruman hoarded a whole bunch of stuff in there, right? So they go in and they find two hidden things. One, a case of gold attached to a fine chain. This case most likely held the One Ring when Isildur had it. And the other thing they find is Isildur's crown. You know, the one that shines red when he puts the ring on? Well, it's called the Elendilmir, a single white star of elvish crystal set in a band of mithril. It is the token of royalty of the North Kingdom and an heirloom directly from Numenor. Why are these things in Orthanc? Well, late in the Third Age, when Saruman is already corrupt, he has minions secretly searching for the One Ring in the river. And during one of these searches, they find the Elendilmir. So there you go, that's why it's in Orthanc. So King Elessar takes the Elendilmir and wears it pretty much only on special occasions. And of course, the finding of this crown and the gold case on the chain is proof that Isildur died while he was wearing them. If these things could be found an age later, then they were not in swift, deep water. but rather in shallow water where they couldn't be swept away. But if that's true, then where is Isildur's bones? Did Saruman take them and desecrate them? If that were so, it was a shameful deed, but not his worst. So the chapter ends on kind of a random note. Numenorean measurements, including a bunch of people's heights, because you were totally wondering about that, right? Well, here we go. 1 ranga, meaning full pace, is slightly longer than 3 feet. It's about 38 inches. 5,000 rangar are equal to 1 lar, or pause. And 1 lar is just about 3 miles, which is a league. 1 league is 3 miles. So 2 rangar is called man-high by the Dunedain, and that's 6'4". But in the early days of the Numenorians in Middle-earth, the average height of a man is taller than that. For example, Elendil is said to be more than man-high by nearly half a ranga, which would make him about 7'11". Wow! But of course, he is said to be exceptionally tall, even by Numenorian standards. Galadriel is about 6'4", so she would be called man-high, and Celeborn is said to be seen as tall among the Teleri. However, the Teleri are generally shorter than the Noldor, on average. The Rohirrim are generally shorter than the Dunedain. Eomer is about the same height as Aragorn, but that's because his grandmother Morwen was a lady of Gondor, of Numenorean descent. Her father was from Belfalas, and a distant kinsman of Prince Imrahil, the Prince of Dol Amroth. So that's why Imrahil and Eomer become friends, and also why Eomer marries Imrahil's daughter, Lothiriel. The hobbits of the Shire are between 3 to 4 feet tall. The Numenorian name for them is halfling, which refers to their height in comparison to Numenorian men. This name is applied initially to the Harfoots, a type of hobbit, who the Numenorians first become aware of in Third Age 1050. The term is later applied to the Fallowhides and the Stewars, the other 2 types of hobbit. So even though no hobbit ever comes to Gondor until Pippin, the Gondorians are aware of halflings due to previous Numenorian contact with them earlier in the age. And finally, a note on the diminishing stature of both Numenorians and hobbits over time. The dwindling of the Dunedain is because of the loss of their ancient homeland of Numenor, nearest of all mortal lands to Aman. The dwindling of the hobbits is due to their becoming a more fugitive and reclusive people, driven to forests and wilderness by the encroachment of the big folk, and not wanting to be seen.